Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of Legacy Liftoff by Dronadair. I'm your host, Cody Retlick, and today with me is a very special guest, a friend of mine, Brandan Boynton. Brandan, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate you hopping on today.
Yeah, hey, it's been great working with you in the past, and I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. So yeah, we messaged. Well, you messaged me. I think you called back in 2022 at some point. That's kind of where we first connected. So Brandon and I, we've worked on. I think we tallied it up. It was about 8 jobs over the course of the last 2 years. Some Maverick work, some FPV stuff. You're obviously a very talented FPV pilot. You own, or you're more known as, I guess, Brandan FPV on all social media platforms. You've built a pretty good following with your drone stuff, FPV specifically, but you also own a company, FPV WorryFree.
Yep.
And it's something that, if you've listened to other episodes, I always love. First, by getting into any of that stuff, I want to go back when you had that aha moment, or what really got you interested in drones in general, right? Of how did you start? Like where did this passion and love come from drones? And just kind of give us that intro of where you started and why you realized that this is something that you should be doing.
And that's a really good question. I think I started, it had to have been about 8 years ago or so, maybe nine, not really sure. And I had a toy drone for Christmas, like probably most people out there. My dad had bought me a pretty crappy toy drone for Christmas. I can't remember what year it was, but it had to have been about 8 years ago. And of course, it got stuck in a tree. And I mean, I got it down and got it stuck in a tree, like everybody does. But after about a year, towards the next Christmas, I wanted to go faster. And so then that's when my parents got me the first FPV drone I had, which was an Eachine Racer 250 back in the CC 3D days, which weren't very fun for repairing, but they were definitely what got me into the FPV space for sure. If it wasn't for that drone, I wouldn't be here today.
Love it. Yeah, I feel like so many people can pinpoint like what that first drone was or why you got it. I'm the same with you. I got a toy drone that was just, you fly it out the in any wind, it just takes off and it has no GPS. And you like, me and my roommate used to do battle bots in the apartment with them. Is they're just that like crappy and small and whatnot. But and that's cool. What made your do you know what made your dad or your get you that toy drone for Christmas? Did you have like a love for like RC stuff or anything like that, or what made him get you a drone?
Yeah, in the past, a long time ago, I had like RC boats and RC helicopters, those really, really tiny little helicopters. But I was big into engineering. My dad, when he retired from the military, he went to school to be an electrical engineer, and he brought me to his school. He went to UWF, where I'm from in Florida, and they had 3D printers there, and they had like all the engineers that were there for school. They had their own like senior projects, and they would leave them at the school. So there was like auto chess games where you could play against robots, and it was some really cool stuff. And so in about seventh grade is when I saw all that stuff, and I got into 3D CAD design. Just on the side, I had Fusion 360, which was free, and I'm pretty sure it's still free. Um, and so with that, I kind of just started designing things. Like I was around when fidget spinners were popular, so I 3D designed fidget spinners. I would just take like any object from like, I don't know, like a baseball card or something, and I would try recreating it in that 3D space, and I loved it. And so before drones, I actually got a 3D printer, a really small, tiny 3D printer, and that it's funny because usually you get into drones, then 3D printing. I'd started in 3D printing the year before drones, and 3D designing just random parts and things, and then I would print them out at my dad's work, at my dad's school, and then eventually he got me the printer first before I got into drones.
Nice. Well, hey, what a skill to have first, and then
Right?
realize like. Yeah, now I love drone, or I'm getting into drones, right? You can, I mean, especially with FPV, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
if you can't 3D print, or if you don't have the ability to do that, I mean, you're waiting on parts, right? You're not
yeah,
knowing,
you're very limited.
yeah, and it's a struggle probably to maintain your drones unless you don't crash. But as we know,
And you're not getting better.
yeah, then right, exactly. Then you're not pushing yourself to the limits, or moving yourself forward at that point. But so cool. I guess now if we're going to that next step, right? Like you got that first drone, you started kind of playing around with it, and then you upgraded to that next or first real FPV drone. How did that kind of progress? Were you just going out there and flying that and practicing that, and then just got a lot better at it, or what was that progression after you starting getting a little bit more advanced?
So yeah, so after that first drone, I really didn't get to fly a lot because of that drone would break pretty easily. And I'm sure everybody when they started, or at least who started around the time of when I started, had the problem where there was nothing in the U.S. to get parts, and if you did, it was 2, 3 times more expensive. So you'd buy everything off Banggood or AliExpress, which is much better now, but back in the day, not very reliable. And so I believe the first yeah, so one, like I'd break an arm, and I could 3D print one, but obviously it wasn't as strong. Or I'd break a motor, and I'd have to wait 3, 4 months for the parts to come in. So really, over that span of the toy drone, and then the FPV drone that I first had, I really only flew maybe like 2 batteries a month because of just stuff breaking and then not being able to fly much anymore. So I mean, those spans of 6 months where I couldn't fly because I had to save up an allowance to buy the drone parts.
So once you were doing that and you got to the point where you were past that, like that first 6 months of you flying a couple batteries, a month, and just getting used to it, what kind of was that? Were you in school still at this time, or what was going on in your personal life that you ultimately then decided to take that next step or go a little bit more full force into it?
Yeah, so that this whole process has been like seventh, eighth grade, and then ninth grade, my freshman year in high school, I was able to work at the soccer fields as like the sidelines and the flaggers and stuff. Kind of keep the parents under control.
I've
And I
done
mean,
that.
those
That's
you
a
make.
tough job. I've
Oh
done
yeah,
that
it's
myself. That is
there's some fights definitely.
yeah.
And so doing that, I could make about $150 a weekend. And so I mean, those in Florida, it's pretty much always nice outside. So I mean, the season's pretty long. It's not really gross. I was in northern Florida, so it was never really super muggy, super hot. Um, and so it was a pretty easy job, kind of just sit around and make sure everybody's under control. But with that, after a few weekends of $150 or so, I saw the what was his name? UAV Features, the Australian guy, Stu. I saw his first $100 drone, the $99 drone build, and so I bought all those parts. And so after a year of having the Eoshin Racer 250, I ended up building that $99 drone, which took about a year to build. Because back in the day, there wasn't very much info and things would go wrong. I burned up an ESC, had to go buy a new one. Um, and so it took about a year from building that drone to actually get it flying. And yeah, so yeah, it was about a year.
Okay. So once you got that thing built, how long did you fly that thing? And were you able to like get parts for that then, or did how was that process once you were done with that build?
So that was a fun problem. It was pretty much the exact same thing as the Eoshin, except now it could go faster and do more, so it would break easier, and the same problem occurred. But at least I had an income that wasn't allowance. So I would still have to wait the 2 months from Banggood and AliExpress for parts, but at least I was able to buy those parts immediately. I couldn't have spare one, so I still had to wait the 2 months. And so I flew that for about a year until I would say about 20, it was 20, the beginning of 2019. And I kind of decided like, this isn't really working. It wasn't super fun because I couldn't fly very much. And when I broke something, like it was very expensive for me at the time. And so I decided to sell everything and focus on my friends and kind of go hang out. We built tree houses and stuff. But then that summer, 2019, so that was my freshman year to my sophomore year of high school, I was able to get a summer job. And that summer job, I was able to make about $2,000 doing stuff. And then after that summer job, I started buying and selling electronics on Facebook. It's something that I've always kind of done, like small stuff, and I'd sell stuff at school. But I got in trouble at school for buying and selling stuff, so I had to move over to Facebook Marketplace. Um, so I started buying like AirPods and Apple Watches, Xboxes, all just whatever I could get my hands on, and lowball everybody and people who'd accept. I'd buy and repost it for how much they posted it for.
Well,
And
hey,
I had all the time. I had all the time in the world. So
that
uh,
entrepreneurial mindset, though, right? It's like
yeah,
it's like, hey, I need to make some money to maybe either fuel your hobby at that time, right? You were just flying for fun at this point, right?
yeah. So actually, that was at the point where I had stopped flying.
Okay.
So I'd sold everything that I had, got the summer job, and started buying and selling electronics. And then around the time of right when digital came out, so when DJI released their digital at the end of 2019, early 2020, I think it was January of 2020. After taking that $2,000, I turned it into about 8 from buying and selling electronics over the course of being in school, sophomore year. And I pulled the trigger and spent, I think it was like $2,000 on like the Rotor Riot kit with digital FPV, the big chunky black radio, and whatever their XL5 or whatever it was. And so that's when I'd say right then, so 2020, beginning of 2020 is right when I started actually flying because I had the money to buy spare parts. I was buying stuff in America from Rotor Riot, and I was able to fly just about every single day.
Love it. Well, I think anybody that got into FPV earlier on realize or remember those days of when those were that digital first came out and
Oh yeah,
and the transition between when analog to digital, but it's like those radios were chunky. They were massive. I remember it too. I seeing them for the first time. I'm not huge into FPV, as you know, just kind of dabble into it as just a fun thing for myself. But it was a crazy time, right? It was like, all right, this is kind of changing the game a little bit in some ways, right? Of FPV, and at that time when you made that switch to buy that next level one, were you in your mind were like, hey, now I'm just gonna get back into it and upgrade and fly for fun? Or what did you start like, hey, should I fly for clients? Or were you, I know you were still in school at this point, right? So
yeah.
you're still kind of doing it for fun, or uh what type of stuff were you flying at that point?
So yeah, so I started with it was still completely for fun. I didn't even know there was money in the space, and it was um, let's see, I would say yeah. So it was all for fun. COVID happened. That's a big point. 2020, spring of 2020, COVID hit, and we pretty much had no school. School got canceled for the rest of the year, pretty much, and gas was like $1 at that
Yeah.
point. So I could drive wherever I wanted to, fly wherever I wanted to. Parks were empty, streets were empty, and that's where I started getting good. And I started posting on Instagram, building a following on Instagram. I posted every single day for the next 3 years at that
Wow.
point. So I mean, I think right now I have like 1,400 posts, but most of that was just from those 3 years, where I posted every single day, trying to build a following, and just because it was fun. At that point, it was fun. I didn't know there was money. I just was building a following because that's kind of what I wanted, and I saw like Mr. Steele and all of them how they were kind of big shots. I was like, that's kind of cool. I was like, I kind of want to be in that position. And so over the course of 2020 is when I really built up all of my skill. I don't think I've really gotten any better since then. I've just gotten better opportunities and better equipment to film with. I think it was 2021. People on Instagram, I think I was at like 10K at that point, and people were like, "You need to get like," because I was still filming with just the DVR from the DJI DVR on just the V1 Air units, and they were like, "You need to get a GoPro." And I was like, I don't really want because like they're kind of expensive, but I was like, it looks really nice. It's something I've always wanted to do. So I got a GoPro. I think it was 2021, summer of 2021. So about a year and a half later after flying, and it was at that point where, not yeah, it was at that point I was graduating high school, and I started. Actually, I think it was Hurricane Sally. This is a good point. I forgot about this one. It was either 2021 or 2020. Hurricane Sally hit Florida, and I had ran out. This is a good, I guess, FPV worry-free moment here. I've always used MG Chemicals conformal coating, and I had flown in the rain a few times, and Hurricane Sally hit, and I was like, well, I want to go. It's like right when the eye kind of hit the area, so I drove out to the beach that was like under, like all of the buildings that were on the beach were under like 3-4 feet of water.
Wow.
Because of the storm surge that came up. And so I launched the drone out of the car and flew. I think it was like 90-mile-per-hour winds. I was full throttle, and I was only moving like 4 miles an hour. Like it was just creeping along. You can go on my channel and see the footage. It's just screaming because I had the raw audio. You just hear the drone screaming and it's not moving.
Those motors had to be so hot when
Oh
you brought
man,
that down.
it was so funny. But then like when I got to where I wanted, I was like, okay, I'm done. I turned around and it just went
God.
shot back. But I posted that video on YouTube, and it got like 60-70,000 views. Fox News took it and posted it on live TV. And there was a local real estate guy in my area that was like, hey, can you go out and film these couple properties? Because he wanted to see how they flooded during the hurricane, because he was interested in buying some property on the water. And I was like, sure. And he was like, what do you want? Like, what do you want me to pay you for it? And I was like, pay you for it? I was like, that's a thing? I was like, I didn't even realize you could make money. And so he's just like, here, I'll give you $300 to go film these 4 properties. So I went out for like 2 hours, filmed 4 properties for like $300-400. I was like, holy smokes, you can make money. The footage was awful, by the way.
What
I mean, it
did
was
you fly
FPV.
for? Was
It
it
was a 5-inch. I just
okay?
flew an X framed 5-inch, so camera tilts at like 10 degrees minimum is like the minimum you could go. So like props were in view, and I'm flying around these properties like trying to just look down and then swoop up and look down, because I don't have a Mavic at that point. And so it was just hilarious. I was like, you can make money doing it. I sent him the footage, and that was the first job I ever did. And I think that was whenever Hurricane Sally was. So I think it was 2021.
Okay. That's hey, and you never know, right? It's like so many people is just like, hey, I want to get this. This is cool, or this is something that I would like to document or show off in some way. You never know what can blow up, or what can, the right person see it or take you to maybe a level where you had no idea that it's like, no, I'm just doing this for me and to post because again, congrats to you. I didn't mention before, but like posting every day for 3 years is insane consistency. And props to you because that's fantastic. I remember when we were doing map stuff, like I was posting a lot more. I didn't get at that traction you did. We were at 10,000 at some point, but as soon as you stop posting, it's like there goes your growth, right? It
Oh
stops
yeah.
in some ways unless you have another video blow up or something. But so I think that's fantastic. So then after that, though, you like had this first job under your belt. You're still flying. What had thought for fun. Did you after that then kind of be like, all right, my wheels are turning. Like, how do I make this now into something that I can make more money for, or did you act on that kind of right away, or what was your thought process after you're like, man, $300-400 for maybe an hour or two of work? Like what was kind of going through your head, and where'd you go after that?
After that, yeah. So I took that idea, and I was like, the entrepreneur side of things. I was like, man, I could like this can make money. And so I reached out to a few of like the local parks to see if they wanted anything. And nothing really ever caught on during that period. But the way I was able to make money during that period to keep funding the drones, while buying and selling electronics, that was around the time when Canada started cracking down on their drone rules. I think it was, I don't know what their regulation is, like CAA maybe. But they pretty much made drones almost illegal. Like FPV drones at one point were pretty much illegal. and everybody was selling their drone stuff there. So I went on, I think it was like rcgroups.com, and they had like a classifieds of just everybody selling stuff. And so I would buy just like a bucket of drone parts. And so during that period, I think I built like 40 drones at
Wow.
that point. That's how I really got my skill of building drones. I took just tons and tons and tons of used parts and was just building kits. So I'd take controller, goggles, batteries, chargers, drone, and I would sell a kit for like $1,000. And it was really good. I got a few of my friends into drones at that point. They never really got to the level that I was at. They all kind of went to college and quit the hobby, but I got into that, and that's how I was able to kind of keep going during that period.
Sweet. Yeah. Again, you found a need, or you found an opportunity, I should say, right? Where you were getting these parts for probably pretty cheap as people were just offloading all of their equipment, and then being able to kind of hone your skill on that and then build that. So you started building these kits. How many of those do you still have, of your own? Do you know?
Oh, I've got none.
Of those original? None
I
of them?
still I'm still in that phase of buying and selling stuff. I still do it occasionally. I really need to stop because it's very time consuming, but it's something that I still enjoy doing. I like cleaning up builds, like just taking like 5 drones that are awful in condition, just tearing them completely apart, cleaning them, and putting them back together and selling them. I mean, I think I did the last time I did it was about a year ago. I bought a big hunk of parts and started selling kits. I made like 5 kits out of all the stuff I had bought. Don't make a whole lot, but it was still kind of fun, and I still enjoy it. Um,
Oh, for
but
sure.
it was, yeah.
Do you so you selling these on Facebook Marketplace? Are you selling them on groups or locals, or how are you selling them? Or I guess now still even.
Originally, it was through rcgroups.com. It was pretty much the Facebook marketplace of drones or just anything RC. So they had helicopters and everything, but I just stayed in the drone section. But eventually, I moved over to my Instagram. Really sold a lot of drone stuff. I would post on my story like, "Hey, I got this kit, like a full kit," and someone that's been following my page that's enjoys my content buys it. I'd say I was pretty gifted to have that available to me. But then I also had like Facebook groups, so FPV Life and all the other big Facebook groups, FPV Marketplace. Those sold a good amount too, and I'd buy
Right.
stuff on there too as well.
Yeah. I mean, hey, again, seeing that availability to your following, and then knowing like, hey, I just post this and I have the following. Those are the people that probably would be your customers, and ultimately just putting it out there, right at that point, is kind of helped you propel and making some extra cash. And so you were graduated at this point, right? Were you working like another job, or were you doing all these kind of side hustles, selling electronics, building kits, like, to make an income, or did you have another job, or how did this next transition phase go for you? To Because I know you reached out to me in like 2022, so if this was all 2021, how did that year go, or how did you be like, all right, because you had a kid, you knew were having a kid around that time, right, at the end of
Yeah,
2022? Is that where you ultimately were like, hey, I want to go at this full time and I got to take this thing seriously? Or what was kind of that moment where you were like, yeah, this needs to happen?
yeah. So all throughout that we're in that 2021 period right now, and so during that period, I I wasn't working. I was still in school in 2021. I graduated high school summer 2021.
Okay.
I met my fiance, which was my girlfriend at the time, and I was accepted into a couple colleges around the area in Florida. I think it was like Embry-Riddle. I got accepted for, and I was kind of in the position where I was going to go down my dad's path of being an electrical engineer because I liked CAD software. I liked the building of drones and all that. But I had met her, and she didn't really have much of any family, and I have a really big family in Indiana. So I decided to bring her up on a summer trip to Indiana to show her my big family, and we had dinners, big dinners, like that she never really was a part of. And so once we moved up to Indiana, I kind of took that summer as like the summer off to kind of just relax and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. My parents weren't too happy about it because they wanted me to go to college, but I was like, I kind of want to just enjoy myself for a summer. So we kind of her and we just traveled around Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin. And during that whole period, I was just filming everything. So I was diving buildings in Chicago. I was flying through waterfalls in Michigan. And so I was just doing whatever I wanted to, getting cool footage and posting on Instagram. And then around the end of the summer, I don't really know what happened, but we kind of just stayed. We just stayed in Indiana, and I ended up was like, well, I kind of need to make money from drones, because at least try it for a year, and then if it doesn't work out, I'll go to college like my parents want me to. And so I took all that footage I had gotten over that summer and built my first show reel. At this point, I didn't even have a computer. All up to this point, I was doing everything off my phone,
Wow.
until that 2021 when I built the show reel. I had bought I'd got an iPad, and so I edited. That was my first video I'd edited on my iPad. So that show reel I then posted on Instagram, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is so cool." But then I found out I was gonna have a kid. So my fiance got pregnant, and I was like, "Well, shoot! Like, I can't go to college now. Like, I could, but it's going to be very difficult." My dad went to college with four 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 kids, then having 5 kids.
Wow.
So, and I didn't want to go through that, or at least even with one.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to really hunker down. And at this point, I had seen all the pilots making money. I had seen Mr. Steele going to the movie industry, Johnny FPV going to the movie industry, Tommy Tabajio, is that how you say his name? Going to the movie industry. And I was like, that's where I want to go. Like, that's cool. Like Fred North, the helicopter pilot, all his stunts and stuff, and helicopters. Like, that seems dangerous. Like, you could replace that with drones at that point. So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to call as many companies as possible and tell them that I'm here. So I kind of just looked up a list of the top production companies in Chicago, Detroit, which didn't really have many, and I just pretty much anybody I could get my hands on, which was Midwest Aerial Productions, Sky Candy Studios, 360 Chicago Tours, 3D Lux Tours. These are all companies that I've posted a lot about because I've worked with them in the past. But those were the main ones that I had worked with over the course of the next few years, because I had called, I think it was nearly 100 companies that winter. So 2021 to 2022, that winter, I had called nearly 100 companies. I didn't have a website. It was just my YouTube, just my Instagram. That's all I had, and my show reel. So it was just, and at that point, I still had a 5-inch and a 3-inch Whoop. It was all, and one GoPro. I think I had like a GoPro 7. So that whole period was where really the money and the actual profession of FPV started to come in.
Nice. I mean, hey, kudos to you, because you ultimately you had this event, this life event happen, right? That you're like, hey, you saw directions, like, hey, I'm just gonna try this. I have to go into it, and you weren't afraid to be like, I don't have a website. People aren't gonna take me serious, maybe, or this or that. You had marketing materials. You had your show reel. You had your Instagram. You had plenty of footage to show people. It's like, hey, I can do this, right? This is not something that's like, I'm brand new. I haven't flown anything. I have a pretty good amount of stuff to be able to sell in some ways that you can do a good job. And just started reaching out, pounding the pavement and calling people. I remember the first call when you did call, me back then with Midwest Aerial Productions. Is like, even at that time when you had called, like, FPV was something that we didn't do a ton of. We had done some, but not a lot. And for us with the pilot network, it was always great to have more people inside of the network that can do different things. And I was very excited about it, I know. And then after that, we kind of started messaging and showing more stuff that you had done, or you would send me, and then you would text me. I remember you would text me like new projects that you were working on, just to like showcase what you were doing, and I'd be like, hey, this is badass, this is cool, like, thanks for sending it. And you were very good on that. I do commend you for that, because you were one of the pilots that I remember that would like text me new things or send me something on Instagram pretty regularly when you would do something that is a great marketing tactic too. Be like, just like sparking people's like thoughts. Is like, oh, I could apply that in a different way, or I have a client that maybe could use this or that. I don't think our first job was FPV though together, right? Did you have a Mavic at that point? Because you had flown a couple. We had a power agency that we did in Indiana, actually. That I know you had flown some of those projects for us. You didn't have. When did you get your first like Mavic? Because you're doing some of that stuff now
So it's
too,
really
right?
funny that you mentioned the whole posting. I'll step back one step. When you told me about, or when you said that I was sending you stuff, I started laughing a little bit because it's kind of a joke with my couple pilots that I was really close with and friends with. It was something I did to every single company that I had ever reached out to, and every single FPV company too. Like even like brands, so T Motor, Gemfan. I would send them everything, not just my stuff, but just things in general, to keep a contact with them and keep
Mhm.
that connection. So you and every single company I could possibly get to, I would just constantly, because I wasn't working, I was trying to make a living off drones, and starting that was how many parts can I get for free. So I started the whole sponsorship thing and trying to figure out like what companies can give me stuff. And so I had a following that I had built, and so that was initially kind of my income was just getting free parts. So the drone didn't really cost me anything at that point because it was always costed money, but now it doesn't. So now I need to start making money from the drones. And one of the companies I had reached out to was Drone Brothers. There was an Amazon warehouse that was being built nearby, and at this point I had just FPV drones. And I walked in to the project manager. I posted a picture on my story of the Amazon warehouse, and I was like, "Should I fly it?" And everybody was like, "Yes." So I was like, like I never did any bandos. I never did anything like that. I never did anything like illegal. So I was like, there's project managers for these companies, these big projects. And so I walked into their trailer and I was like, hey, do you guys have a drone company? Like, do you guys do drone stuff? They're like, yeah, we have this company called Drone Brothers, and they do this stuff, whatever. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, do you have their phone number or anything? He's like, no, I don't have their phone number. And so I showed him my drones, my FPV drones, and he didn't really seem very interested in drones. He was just like, yeah, it's just something that they do, I guess. And so I looked up Drone Brothers, and I found Andy, which was the owner of Drone Brothers, and I called him. I was at the Amazon warehouse. I called him right there in the parking lot, and I said, hey, I'm at the Amazon warehouse in Elkhart, Indiana. They said that you're the drone company that films for them. I was wondering if you guys did any FPV stuff, and they had no FPV stuff. And I was like, I do this FPV thing. Did my whole spiel, sent him my show reel at the time, and we kind of kept in touch. I did the whole sending of everything that I was doing, and eventually, I think it was 2 months later, he ended up sending me my Mavic. The Mavic, it was a Mavic Air 2, and he sent me the Mavic and had me film that warehouse. And so about 2 months later, I posted on my story, and I was like, hey guys, guess what?
It finally worked
I was
out.
I was flying through the building because I brought FPV drones. I was allowed to be there, so I flew the FPV drones through. But the job with Drone Brothers, they just did kind of mapping, so we would fly over the whole property and create a map every 2 weeks. Take pictures going all the way around the building, and that was pretty much it. It was pretty easy. I was making like $200 a flight, so I would come every 2 weeks and make $200, which was enough for groceries, enough for everything I was doing. And that's how I got my first Mavic.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and those flights, right? A lot of them are autonomous. They're already either, programmed into a flight planning software, and you just kind of show up and click a button. In some of those that they're right, the contract that we've done plenty of those ourselves, where it's a little bit of an easier job where it's hey, $200. You're there for probably about an hour. It's a pretty good hourly rate, right? And people
Oh
always
yeah,
say, like, hey, that's not enough. That's not enough here or there. So some people it's not, but even to yourself that at that time, right, you were just trying to get some jobs, but also they're super easy. Like you're not having to do any of the
yeah.
planning, the flight planning, anything else, no processing, nothing. That's, that's $800 a month or sorry,
They're
400
four
bucks a month,
hundred bucks a
right?
month.
$400 a month, use every other week, for really just going and showing and clicking a button and getting out of there, right?
Yeah.
But that's just another way that I think people just like, it's just not a good price or whatever. If it's close to you and it's easy, look at the hourly rate. That's how I always break things down for people too. It's like, if you don't have to do anything else and you have literally an hour's worth of work, $200 an hour. If anybody's passing up $200 an hour for something, I guess you're either at a very awesome high level, you don't have time, or you have a lot of stuff, I guess, but you have to look at it from that perspective of opportunity, and that brought you more opportunity as well, right? It got you then your Mavic, which then we contracted some jobs on that, and then I'm sure you got other work with that. But so kind of now you're at the point, you're starting to make some money, things are kind of hitting a little bit more. How did you start to ramp up? Because I would love to talk about some of the projects that you've worked on, right? You've done some really, really badass projects with working with, New England Patriots, and you've done some cool travel, spots and videos and whatnot. But how did that kind of now transition to like, all right, starting to get paid now, and you kept keeping in contact with people and putting your stuff out there? Where did you kind of start to see then that ramp up?
Looking back on it, it's honestly a little scary realizing that, like, if like right now in my position, looking back, I should have told myself to quit. Where I am now, I'm very happy, but like making, like you're saying, like the $200 an hour, but that was like the only job I had for like 6 months. So I mean, I was living off of it. My fiance and I, we kind of just were traveling around, just kind of going to the beaches and doing whatever we wanted to. I was just living out of my parents' house for the summer. But this is now 7, 8 months later, and it's at the point where that year is coming up where I can't go to school at this point because I'm gonna have a kid. And so the ramping up really was kind of it was really slow. Over the course of, I would say, a year, working with Drone Brothers, 360 Chicago tours, which was real estate. So I was traveling 2 hours to Chicago to fly through like $500,000 to $1 million houses and just kind of do a tour around and fly back out, and that was pretty much it. But that was another one of those, like $300 to do it. It was like an hour of work plus 4 hours of driving, which wasn't fun, but it was still definitely worth what I was doing. And so I would say it slowly started to ramp up. There was the companies I'd mentioned before. You reached out. I did a job with you down there in Grissom, Indiana, by the Air Force Base, and that was the first job I did where I got authorization to fly near a base or airports, and I was like, holy smokes, like that's kind of cool. I was like, I actually, I didn't mention my 107. I got that 107 at the beginning of that summer when I graduated high school. That's when I got my Part 107. And so that was when I was like, oh, I need to be a professional pilot. I'll try it out for a year, kind of thing.
Yeah. I
But
remember.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So during that period there was about a year working with you, a couple other companies, and I had, at that point with you, I had done like FAA authorization, so I knew how to do that. Working with Drone Brothers, I was doing construction with like Amazon, Stryker, so I had like big names with them to put on like my sort of resume. And then 360 Chicago tours, I had a bunch of just scenic, cool stuff in Chicago and intricate flying around people. We did a couple, like we did a barber shop, and then we did a CrossFit gym. So we like people throwing weights and stuff. That was pretty cool. And at that point, I had made my next show reel. So about a year later, after my first one, I actually had some work. And so I made a show reel of kind of the coolest stuff I could. And I had sent that to Sky Candy, which was one of the companies that I was talking to for a year at this point. And so I was talking to them, and I sent them that show reel, and they were like, hey, we have a job for you. Like, finally, out of the blue, he's like, we got a job for you. And it was a casino in Chicago. They paid my full rate, which was the first time. Usually I'd say my rate was $1,000. And then they're like, well, we have $300. I'd be like, okay. That's pretty much where it was at. But Sky Candy was like, $1,000 deal. We want you for a day and a scout day, which will pay you 50%. I was like, scout day, 50%? Like, that's crazy. And this is where I started learning a little bit about the production space. I did that job with them, and before I even did that job, they were like, "Hey, we got another job for you." With the what was it? It was Raleigh. It was in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was for NHL. Um, and so it was like live broadcasting. They wanted us to fly through the stadium at night, the night before, so that they could put those FPV videos on the live TV. And so within a span of a month, I had done 2 jobs of Sky Candy, and I was kind of that Sky Candy guy at that point. He really liked my flying. At least I imagine he did, considering we have been working together ever since. And I would say Sky Candy really is the company that really got me where I am at this point. It's kind of scary to think about because it was almost like it was pretty much mostly them. I was still obviously working with you. I was working with other companies as well, but Sky Candy really got me to those names: NFL, NHL, American Place, Top Rank Boxing. Like they did lots of sports. So we pretty much filmed like almost every sport. I was getting a job with them about 1 to 2 times a month. I was traveling all over the country at that point, everywhere. Yeah, that's really where it ramped up. It was meeting Sky Candy and them hiring me was where everything really started to fall into place.
Can you hear that?
Just a tiny bit, not much.
Where is that coming from? Sorry, I'm not, but it's like it's a FaceTime call or something, but what was that? Sorry. I'm gonna
What's
have
our
to
time at right now?
41:43.
Oh, okay.
Weird. Oh, it was a huddle from Slack. I guess that doesn't get no blanked out. All right. I'm gonna have to remember to cut this out, but no worries. I don't know. I guess do not disturb doesn't work with Slack. Cool. I'll just go into then after that. So that's fantastic. Sky Candy's obviously been a household name in a lot of different sporting events and FPV stuff. I think, in the beginning they uh had a pretty good breadth of clients that they were around doing different stuff. And I do remember also you sending me that video of you doing the NHL game, and you're like, hey, look at this job I just got, and you were flying in that NHL stadium. I'm like, well, what a second, FPV job, or second I say, but second with them, right, of trying to get that up and running and going like crazy. But and that's what I think for everybody that's listening or might listen to this, that's just the idea of opportunity and collaboration and connection and like being in front of people at the right time and the right place. You never know, right, what's going to happen, or maybe they have other pilots that are on vacation, or they are sick, or they can't do this, or they're booked, right? So it's like being able to be there for when that time comes for whatever that opportunity is. uh, they don't know, they can't reach out to you if they don't know about you,
Yeah.
right? So just putting yourself out there and being in front of them is critical, and it's something that obviously you've been able to take advantage by doing that. You did a good job in the beginning and probably still doing it. So I want to talk a little bit about your also your FPV WorryFree stuff, because
Oh
you're
yeah.
you've created a product as well that you sell, right? That is for waterproofing drones. I mean, it could be used for a lot of different things, I think, right, from a waterproofing standpoint. But how did you mentioned a little bit earlier, but how did that kind of all come about? And when did you decide, like, all right, I want to create this product and start selling that?
So I think it was around that first summer. That summer when I got my Part 107, I'd found like I had issues with MG chemicals not working when they're submerged in water. And I had this dream of flying through a waterfall, which was in my first show reel. And so I found Cot King at the time, and it was like I think it was like $18-19 for a tiny little tube, and it worked. It worked that summer. I was like, man, like that is really expensive for so little. And I was like, there's got to be like a better product out there. And so I started buying just like caulk. I bought like hot glue and just as many. I had like an entire bucket full of different products to try to find whichever thing was the cheapest one. like the cheapest but best working one. And so I got in touch with a brand, and I started working with them, and we rebranded their product under FPV WorryFree. So I pretty much just buy the product, package it, make all I made some tutorials on it, and started building a brand behind FPV WorryFree. And that's really just, it kind of just took traction through my Instagram, through going to Castle Crash, which was a fun event. Gave away waterproofing to every single person that was there. And pretty much I did the GoPro strategy, just give everything away and everybody will enjoy it. That's pretty much just, it's snowballed since then. I really don't do anything with it. I got in contact with, really, I think the hardest part was scaling it.
Yeah.
Scaling that is very difficult. Originally it was like $10 a tube for double the amount of Cot King, whatever it was. I can't remember exactly what it was. But it was trying to ship out all that stuff was a hassle. During that whole period, of course, I wasn't working a whole lot, so I was able to do it. But like shipping every single order, keeping track of orders, PayPal fees, and trying to keep track of all that it was pretty hard, even just after like 200 orders. So I got in contact with Drone Theory. I had reshared one of their drones. It was the Mojo, and it blew up on my page. It was the biggest video I think I had posted at the time. It was like, I think it was like 500,000 views.
Wow.
And so they sent me one to test. It was a new demo unit that they wanted me to test out. But turns out, the Chris, which is the one that designed the Mojo, he's partnered with David, who is the owner of Drone Theory, who kind of sells the drones. But he is the co-founder or co-owner of Race Day Quads and Pyrodrone. So he's sold out and he's kind of moved on from them to his own stuff. But he still had connections at Race Day Quads and Pyrodrone. So he pretty much directly was able to get me into just those two stores. And once I was in those stores, it was super easy to get into any other store. I reached out to Newbie Drone, I reached out to Get FPV, and then at that point, I was getting thousands of messages on Instagram of people like in Germany, Australia, Brazil, like, how can I get your waterproofing because none of these stores ship there? So just every time someone reached out, I'd say, what store do you buy stuff from? They would say, this store. I'd tell them, message that store and say, you want FPV WorryFree? I'd message them, and then they would say, hey, we want 20 kits. And I'd ship them 20 kits, and it kind of just snowballed, and now I have a decent network of stores that have it. And I just spend a week straight out of every couple months just making hundreds or thousands of kits and then just distributing. I don't make a whole lot from it. It originally was still one of those fun things to do. That is just kind of keeps going. And so I don't make a whole lot from it, but it's worth doing.
It's passive income at some points, right? Though,
Yeah,
like,
in a way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, what a good idea though too by you of like, hey, what store do you buy it from? Because like you could easily just been like, yeah, I don't ship there, or we don't sell there, or I one-off type jobs like that, or I guess if you're getting thousands, it makes sense. But rather than be like, hey, tell them that you want it, I'll reach out, you reach out. What a great
It worked out so well.
I mean, it's a great, sales tactic, right? To be able to drive that demand from not only their customers, but then for the suppliers to say, hey, yeah, the demand is there. I've had a couple people reach out. Let's do this, right? And then it's an easier sell for you to just send them kits and give them to them for them to sell into their own stores. So that's cool. So where can someone buy it now? Is it Amazon? Is it on your website, or where can they find FPV WorryFree if they're interested?
That's a good point. So you mentioned a website. That's still in the works. That's kind of the next big step in FPV WorryFree, is having my own store where I can sell. It'll be probably through Shopify. I'm still trying to work on it and figure it out. Releasing maybe more products, and FPV WorryFree is going to turn into a lot more than just FPV WorryFree. If you noticed, about a year ago, I had rebranded into FPV WorryFree as the company, and now the product is Extreme. So eventually there'll be more products, and I'll also have services. So currently, over the last year, kind of under the table, not under the table. It's still through my company, but just no website. I've been doing custom drone builds still, and so that's all being through FPV WorryFree. Custom waterproofing, so if people want waterproof drones, I've been doing that. Just anything to deal with drone naked cameras, so taking apart GoPros, Black Magics. I've been kind of just doing all that through FPV WorryFree, and eventually, once the website's done, it'll be kind of a whole come to service. My next idea, which I haven't done yet, but I'm considering it, is making an FPV rental house where people, because when I started, I had gotten a call for filming a movie. I was like, oh my god, I'm here, and I didn't have any of the equipment to film the movie. I had the drone, but like I didn't have a $10,000 Komodo. So
Right.
at the time, I was like, well, like what do I do? I was like, I could rent it, but it was like really expensive. But I had the drone at least. The problem is you can't rent a drone. You can't rent an FPV drone anywhere, like a Cinelifter. You can rent the camera, so the camera wasn't a big deal. But I ended up just opening a credit card underneath my company. I bought the camera, did the job paid off the camera. So now I had the camera with me. But since then, I've really started to think about it. And if I didn't already have the drone, I wouldn't have been able to do that job at
Right.
all. I would have had to cancel it. I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I'm really thinking about starting a complete FPV rental house where you can come to me or come to FPV WorryFree and say, hey, I got this job. Can you give me a quote on a Blackmagic 4K rig to film this commercial? And so instead of having to spend $2,000 on a drone, $3,000 on a camera, you can rent it for $500 to $1,000,
Yeah.
and be able to accept the jobs and maybe practice with it, get some cool footage with it while you have it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a cool idea. I would imagine that there's some liability for you or some
Yeah,
vetting process too, right? Of like, hey, insurance policies, you have to have that on for rentals and
that's
being
the
able to.
hardest thing that I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, I mean, right, how do you vet them if they're qualified to be able to fly something like that? Because as you know, right, you can't just pick up an FPV drone because
Yeah,
you fly Inspires or Mavics or any other drones out there that have GPS or position hold, I should say, or something like that where it's very easy to fly and a lot less liability where crashing is way more prevalent
mhm,
than what it would be. So I think it's a cool idea. I think there's probably some huge opportunities for that. And I'm sure if anybody's listener has any thoughts on ideas for that to kind of help propel it, reach out to Brandon. You never know what who might be listening or have some thoughts on it. But um, we're at about 52-ish minutes here now. So before I let you go, I mean, I kind of know your setup and your rigs at this point, but what is kind of, because you have the whole gamut. Even see some of them behind you
oh
there,
yeah.
obviously from drones. You showed us the Komodo. You got a whole bunch. Obviously, it depends on your different types of jobs, your environments, your flying client needs, all of that, right? There's a whole lot of variables that goes into your favorite rig. But what's kind of like your go-to rig right now? And let's separate it between indoor flying and outdoor flying. Like just like if you had it doesn't matter budget, anything like that, whatever. If you were just to fly something to get the best clean, crispy footage, what's your favorite indoor and outdoor drone right now?
I would say just overall over the last couple years, especially working with Sky Candy and the tours companies that I've been working with, whoops have definitely been kind of the biggest thing. So originally I started off with like a 3 inch with a GoPro strap to it, so full sized GoPro.
Is that a Shen drones
Yeah,
right there? Or what?
that's the Shen
Yep,
drone
yep.
word.
I got that one.
So
I got that one
originally
right here.
that's kind of what it started with, and over I would say over the period, the drone I made the most progress with is probably a 2.5 inch with a naked GoPro. I would say about 80% of my work has been with this. Um, Not 80% money, but 80% of the work, because
Yeah.
obviously the pay is a little less for GoPros. But then even going down from a step from there, working with Spider and Drone Theory, there's the ITZY. when the O3 unit came out, you can strip it naked, and this can film 4K video without a GoPro, and this can fly over people. You got remote ID on it. I have one over here with remote ID, and this can live stream 1080p. And so a lot of the Patriots, the MLB, those were with this because I could fly over people and still get fantastic footage. And so this is honestly, if I was going back 2 years and this existed, because it exists right now, this would be the biggest thing for getting into professional work because it's so small. You're comfortable flying this anywhere. I mean, you could fly this in your house and dive downstairs. So it's so easy. But then, I mean, you can go a step from there. This is another really easy rig. So if you can get into, if you want to take a step up from GoPro, this is just a 3.5 inch, which is usually used for carrying a GoPro. This camera just came out. It's the Blackmagic 4K G2, which is a Blackmagic 4K in that tiny little platform, which is ridiculous. This is a raw camera. You can film raw video on this. You can change your ISO in post. You can change your white balance in post. And like, this is for movies almost. It's lower budget movies, lower budget commercials will use this. And I mean, this rig, I just flew it through, for the first time, I flew it through Vast Manufacturing, which is a partner of SpaceX. That was for Sky Candy Studios, and I flew this through CNC machines. I was flying it through. It was so crazy, the amount of, like, this thing is crazy. Brand new kind of setup that this is pretty much, I'm pretty sure this is the only one that is like this. There may be other people that are doing stuff now that I've posted stuff about it, but it's just crazy that this is possible. But before that, it was a 4-inch with a Blackmagic. So this is actually a Blackmagic 6K. I have a 4K as well, but I now don't need the 4K because I have the smaller rig.
Right.
6K is still quite a bit bigger, but they were about the same size. So the 4K is the same size as this, just with a 4K sensor instead. And so this was still a fantastic option, a 4-inch drone. I could fly this through my legs. I could fly it around people. And so when I first started working with Sky Candy, I had this. And every job that he hired me for was for GoPro because they just always did stuff with GoPro. And I would bring this out every single time. He'd hire me for GoPro, I'd bring this out and I'd film with it. It's like, dude, like, this footage is nuts. Obviously, I would charge like 2-3 times more to fly this, but I would just bring it and do a flight. So I at least was building that show reel. Yeah. And so over the course of the 6-7 months of working with Sky Candy and other companies, I was flying this for free. And I built out my Blackmagic show reel, which was my favorite show reel I've made so far. Just stunning footage, lens flares, and this, I believe, is what kind of took me to that next level to get into the movie space. Because once I was working with the Blackmagic, I understood how the cinema cameras work. So when the time came when I had sent that show reel of a cinema camera to a production house, they said, we want to hire you for a movie. But I didn't have a movie camera. They were filming with the Red Raptor, so the big brother of this one. The what is that, like an $80,000 camera?
I would say so, yeah.
Crazy. And so this was able to match it. Turns out, I didn't know at the time, but once I finished the job, I found out that NERC was supposed to be filming the job. And the reason they hired me instead was because I said I had this camera, which I had bought and then learned how to use over the course of the 2 weeks before the job and used it. I feel a little bad about it, but that really is what kind of got me where I am, being able to I went to Costa Rica. I went out of the country. It was the first time I left the country ever in my life, and I saw culture, and that's really, now that was a year ago. This is now a year old of that whole process, or just under a year ago. January, February, March, April, May. It was in May, and that really set me aside from everybody else, was this camera, which is kind of silly to say, but it's true, and anybody can get this. If you think this is expensive, it is. But if you have an LLC, or even if you don't, it costs like $100 to make an LLC. Right. You can go to any bank and they will let you have this. And I mean, this is still free. I haven't paid this off yet. It was $10,000 for a year of no interest. So I have the money now because I did the job. It's in a savings account, so I don't have to worry about having credit card debt. But this camera I've had for free for an entire year, and I had insurance on it. So at any point, if anything happens to it, insurance will pay how much I bought it for, and I could pay off my credit card debt if I had to.
Yeah. Right.
And I've told dozens and dozens of pilots this that have said like where you are is like so crazy. I want to be there. And if they think it's equipment, you can buy equipment. Like equipment is not that hard to get. It seems expensive. Like this looks really expensive, and it is. But you can, with an LLC, a company, if you just create your own company, you can get this stuff for so cheap. I mean, almost all of this is on a credit card that I can pay off right now, but I haven't needed to. So I was able to upfront all of that. The bank kind of gave it to me and was able to get a loan, which is just a credit card with like a $20,000 credit card limit at 0 interest for a year. And it's incredible. And I made a post about it on Facebook, and it got taken down from
Really?
I was in the Sinlifters group. I was like, hey guys, like the new pilots that are out there, because I mean the group is like huge, but not very many pilots are in there that are actually flying this kind of stuff. And I was like, guys, I have this camera. I did a movie. You guys need to create an LLC and go to the bank, and they will give you a loan to buy your equipment that you need to take the next step. And I think it was Benoit. I don't really like him very much, but I don't know much about him. But he took the post down because he was probably jealous. I don't know if he was jealous or he just didn't like the fact that it was FPV related. He said that you couldn't post FPV related stuff. That was kind of why it was taken down, because it wasn't FPV related. But it kind of like showed people like anybody can get the equipment that they need.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing, right? There's always creative ways to take that next step with equipment, and obviously you should feel comfortable that you can fly those things and have insurance on it in case it goes wrong, and all of that, making sure that you have your balances paid. And once you make the money or you have a job, that's the one thing I always tell people too, is like, if you're looking to upgrade equipment or you have an opportunity come to you and that job is going to pay for some of that equipment, if you have to say no, you're not getting that job. And you're also not getting that next job that comes through that you have it. You can't market it that you have that equipment. You can't accept that job. But if that job, what I always tell people is, if that job that you don't have equipment for pays for 50% or more of that equipment, and you can go less if you want, there's no, but that's just my thought, is like, if it's already paying for half of it and I just have to get maybe one more job like that, or in your case where it paid off the whole entire drone or camera, right, in one job, how would that not be worth it, right? To at least purchase it. There's plenty of ways to get that out there, and then either pay it off right away and you're good and you're good to go, or set that money aside so that obviously you don't spend it on other things, so that you can ultimately pay it off when that comes due. But if you're smart about it, allow your jobs to pay for your upgrades and your equipment, and you can obviously then take more jobs and market yourself in a way you weren't able to before, right?
I mean, that's for most people is probably the scariest thing, is how expensive everything is. And if you don't have the money to pay off your debt, that's a big problem. But if you can pull out a loan, buy the equipment you need to get the work that will pay it off, and you just hold that money in a savings account, you can then, now you feel safe. You just have 10 grand sitting there in a bank account that at any point, if anything happens in your life, like, what is it, like 1% of America has more than or has less, hold on, I think it's like 1% of American citizens have more than $1,000 in a account to be able to, like, which is scary. And I understand there's people in the position where they're in that position, they can't get out. But if you're able to pull out a loan to buy the equipment to start a company that can then pay off that loan within a week or two of doing some work, and now you can have that loan, which is usually, I mean, any bank will give you a 0% interest for a year, at least for a year. And then you can just hold that money, and that's kind of your safe haven for at least to get you through what you need to get through and grow your company.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that's trying to take that next step, or hasn't started a company yet, start an LLC. Like, at the very least, like, it's so cheap, it's so easy not to. You can obviously write stuff off. And this isn't a business podcast, but I love it because, that's what it is. It's entrepreneurship. It's
Yeah.
finding different ways to be able to grow and scale your business, and understand that there's different things that you can do out there that will put you in a position to get these next big jobs, or to take that next step in your career and whatnot. So, Brandon, I really appreciate you being on today. We're over an hour
Oh, geez, yeah.
today, so
Fun.
it's great. I love it. It's our longest podcast today, but I think it's packed with some awesome stuff. It was amazing hearing your story. I've heard some of it myself in the past, but it's great to share it and to tell people kind of your start and struggles, and how you navigated this and turned it into something that is awesome. I look forward to working with you again, hopefully in the future. And yeah, if anything, how I always like to end is, how can anybody reach out to you? What's the best way? We'll post all of your links and stuff that was mentioned in the podcast today in our show notes. But how can people reach out, and who are you looking to connect with?
I'd say just Instagram. I mean, you can reach out. I'll eventually have my website posted, which I'm still working on. It should be posted here in about a week. So probably when this launches, I'll have that available, hopefully. Might be linked below. But I would say Instagram. I get hundreds of messages there every week from pilots that want to know how I'm doing things. And I mean, I've told this story quite a few times to up and coming pilots who kind of want to take their next steps. And I've always been there for anybody who reaches out. I respond to every single message. Um,
Yeah,
Pilot, like personal, like when I went to Castle Crash, like Jack Hutchby, he's kind of my go-to drone pilot right now for when I need an assistant. And he finds it incredible that I respond to so many like I can scroll through my Instagram and it's just messages and messages, and I respond to all of them. I spend at least an hour a day going through and making sure that if anybody has any questions, they're trying to build a drone. And I'd say that's probably a good reason why my following is at least stayed strong-ish. I haven't been posting as much. I used to post every single day. I really post like every other week, once a month now, but it's kind of kept strong because people keep reaching out. I am interacting with people all the time. I never leave anybody on red, and if I do, it's because I'm trying to figure out an answer for them.
yeah,
But I
that's
mean,
fantastic.
it's a great. I like to be that person that I didn't have when I first started,
Love it.
to kind of push you to the next level.
Hey, I say it. I've said it a lot. I'll say it again. Collaboration over competition, right?
Yes.
If we can help each other out and push the industry and ourselves forward, it's only going to
Totally.
grow together. So I love it. It's a great mindset. And so anybody reach out to Brandon. I'm sure he's happy to help, as
Oh
as
yeah.
he said. And we're also trying to grow the podcast. So if anybody can help us with either a like or a comment or a share on the podcast if you enjoyed it, it's very helpful for us to kind of continuously share, pilots and people in the drone industry stories like Brandon's today. So all great stuff. Brandon, I'm sure we will catch up again soon, but again, appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon.